Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Fandom. Welcome to the Burnett Work. I am RM, and of course, we have with us tonight Catherine. Catherine, how are you tonight?
Good.
Catherine, it's such a pleasure to have you here. You and I have been waiting for this film, Aquaman 2, to come into the theaters, and it's finally here this weekend, guys. I do want to mention for those of you who are watching this, there will be spoilers. I can't help myself because I enjoyed this film so much. So there's going to be some spoilers for you guys out there. I have in the banner, just so you know, there will be spoilers when you're watching this. Want to welcome everybody here to the show. Catherine, we've been waiting so long. We've been talking about this, I guess, maybe since the summer in the anticipation of Aquaman 2. It's finally here. I saw the film today. When did you see the film, Catherine?
Yesterday.
Okay. So, to be honest with you, I wish I was able to see it one more time because there's a lot in this film, Catherine, much more than I thought I would see. And I just really enjoyed this film, Catherine. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I knew what the plot would be. I think most of us went into it knowing more or less what the plot would be, but I was so pleasantly surprised with what I got that I'm just pleased as punch. And I remember leaving the theater and I thought to myself, gee, I wish I could just see it one more time so I could kind of write down details and figure out what was going on in between. But Catherine, since you have seen the film as well, what did you think of the film just in general?
I think it needed a couple more rewrites. It had very scattershot video game type plotting, where everything seemed to be in a rush to get to the next setup. It's like I think they could have used more breathing room between some of these things. I think it would have been better if they just adhered to what was in the first trailer, where it's like, okay, here's Black Manta. He's got this thing. He wants to destroy Atlantis. And Orm, who should be feeling somewhat guilty about this because he's the one who gave him the Atlantean technology in the first place, and teaming up with Arthur. And it's like, and instead it goes in this other direction where a bulk of the movie concerns Black Manta doing something entirely different that has nothing to do with really getting revenge on Aquaman. Uh, and it is zipping all over the place, and it feels like they sort of regressed Arthur Curry from the somewhat more matured version of him that from the first movie to being just total bromoa all the way through this. And I was very surprised that Orm doesn't try and seize the throne from him again when he sees it's like everything Orm predicted is coming to pass, and he's just kind of chillaxed the whole time, which I thought was kind of odd. But it was fun. It had, you know, inconsistent visuals in terms of the quality of the effects, but it was very, zippy, fun type of stuff. I was down with the back and forth between him and his brother. That was funny. Some of the visuals were really cool, particularly, the Lost Kingdom itself gave me like Mordor type vibes, like Barad-dûr and everything. It just looked so
Yes,
much like that.
absolutely.
I was surprised that Randall Park's character, the scientist, Stephen Shin, had as much screen time as he did. He's in a lot of this movie. Um, but yeah, it was a fun zippy adventure movie. I gave it 3 out of 5, but it was still fun. I just think it could have been easily a bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a very like adequate analysis of what the film is. So, with that being said, one thing I can say is that I'm just noticing just personally, and I think it was probably the truth for the first film as well, that this film really is, heavily based on Momoa's individual personality as well as his culture. And I don't think we really ever seen that in a superhero before where they decide to incorporate the actor's individual culture and behavior, the way that Jason Momoa behaves, the way he carries himself. It's clear that the personality of Aquaman is not written anywhere. It's Jason Momoa, let's say, adding to it. And that's fine. This is a decision that they made in the film, and they are doing this to build off of the charisma and the charm off of Jason Momoa himself, who has kind of become this advocate for climate change and no plastic in the oceans, and they're riding this wave all the way to what I would say is the bank. Although I don't know if the film's going to perform well, but I honestly do believe that they wanted this to be really just Jason Momoa, and it's okay for them to exploit that because he certainly hasn't lost any of his appeal. He has great chemistry. He looks good on the screen. what did you think about the family setup in the beginning where we get that, kind of thing where he's not a s- how would I describe it? He's not a single parent, but he's kind of giving this impression as if he's up all night taking care of the baby and, he's maybe even a little bored with what he's doing. Do you think that was the right tone?
Well, it's really weird considering that he's the king of Atlantis and yet he's still seemingly spending full time at his dad's house. It's like you have the kid and them, and I guess it's because of the family unit. It's not like, again, he bringing him his own culture there. It's not like an abnormal thing for him to be living with his father or anything like that. But he's also still out doing things that the king of Atlantis wouldn't be doing. He's still out being the hero known as Aquaman, going to save people. And I like especially when they make the joke that when he's raiding the ship in the beginning that the pirates have taken over, and he's like, yeah, people make fun of me because I talk to fish, and then but then I do this. Then he goes to kick like a bunch of ass. It's like, okay, that's really cool. But it's like they did rush that montage where it's kind of odd, where he's like, oh, nobody told me that there's basically a senate that he has to answer to. We can't get anything done. This is so boring. Him falling asleep on the throne, stuff like that was a bit much, because again, it seemed like his character in the first movie goes from being, even in the beginning of the first movie, he still was more adult, if you will. It wasn't totally bro like all the time. And this movie, it's like he's kind of regressed to that. And the opening montage, I get it. They just want to sum up what his life has been like since then. But it was admittedly a little weird. How it's like, what exactly do you do as King of Atlantis if you're just hanging out at your dad's house and going to save people from pirates still? I mean,
Yeah, it was odd. I felt it was odd. Like there's that scene, Catherine, and I'm sure you remember where he's sitting on the throne, mirrors by his side, and he falls asleep and the crown falls off his head. And it's
right.
kind of like I said, that's not a good sign. It's like almost like a bad omen, isn't it?
Well,
For
yeah, and then he says, regarding the Brine King, he's like, "Do you know what part of him I'm supposed to be looking at?" And I'm like, "Really?" I was like, "This is a bit much for King." But yes, I agree with Dino Dinosaur's comment there that it does get better when Orm linked up. Uh,
yes. Yeah, I agree
Meanwhile,
too. Go ahead.
I'm not sure where Black Manta got this whole pirate army and this massive ship. Because we saw that he hijacked the submarine for him, and he had that in the first movie. He has that small manta ray shaped ship, and now he's got this huge war vessel with all. I'm guessing all these guys are other mercenaries or pirates who are just upset with Aquaman messing with them over the years or something. But it's like, man, you got a really tight operation, and I felt like, do you really need all this extra crap to stop? Like, you have enough stuff here already to go fight Aquaman. You nearly killed him a couple times in the first movie. It's like you don't really need to go all the way, uh, with all this extra stuff. Um, but that kind of becomes this thing, and now we're going after the weird orichalcum or whatever that they mentioned that so many times in this movie. Uh, and I'm surprised though at how quickly we get to Orm, because that's again goes back to sort of scattershot plotting. Like we're in such a rush. Okay, here we've gone into the Arctic and found the Black Trident. There's something going on. Oh, now we're gonna raid Atlantis. So we breached the gate. Oh, the first go-to plan is let's get Orm out of jail. It's like you're the king and you have all these other people who are upset with you now because you're bringing all these other, as they say, you've brought your surface enemies down to Atlantis, and you would think they'd team up with um other Atlanteans stuff before he resorts immediately to just, oh, we got to break Orm out of jail to find it. It's like you're the king of Atlantis, you have all of these other kingdoms that'll follow you, and you don't have any resources there that can help you find Black Manta except for Orm, which I thought was funny. But yes, Kordax equals Sauron, Kingfish equals Jabba the Hutt, Black Trident equals the One. Yes, that's very much what's going on. Or I noticed the
That's
Black Trident also was reminiscent of the Necrosword from Thor: Love and Thunder. Same type of idea. And that one line, God, when Manta attacks Atlantis and he wants to kill Aquaman, and he says, "Oh, you took your brother's woman too, Aquaman. You should be ashamed." And I was just cringing so much at that line because I'm like, no, don't say crap like that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Catherine. I was just popping up people's comments to Dino Dinosaur, Scott Bartholomew, Regal Esquire is here, Daniel Barry Sports, all of you guys, Gary Bando Sandwich, thanks for popping in and giving us different things that you were thinking about. Bonzo Kilborn also, he hears Aquaman is really making waves. You know something, Catherine, I thought that there are a lot of Easter eggs to other movies, to other things that people liked. Those octopus looking creatures that they used to travel in did remind me of something from, either The Matrix or the creatures from the Terminator,
Oh, you mean the vehicles like the rope? Yeah, they kind of look just like the tripods from War of the Worlds a bit,
yes.
and like the Sentinels somebody pointed out from Incredibles, and just it was kind of neat how they operate. I kind of yeah, 6 out of 10. That's what I gave it to, Mikey. Uh, it kind of I thought it was kind of neat how they operate, but again, the fact that the scientist is just able to repair these things off the cuff. It's like you've been wanting to see Atlantis forever. You believe in the myth, but you don't really know anything about their tech and everything. Oh, but I just fixed it. Lickety split. It's like what? Is it okay? That was a little silly. But okay, you know.
Yeah, this you make a lot of good points, and I think what is really interesting about all of this is I had this weird feeling when Shin kind of popped up and he's, out in the Arctic, and I almost thought about The Thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I got this strange vibe about this movie, and I realized that it does have a lot of feel good Easter eggs to other films. However, for anybody who's watching this, to be honest with you, the story is, I love the story. I love the story. I did love what they did with it. And one of the biggest concerns that I had, Catherine, was with the bad guy in the story, and whether he was going to at least feel as if he was a threat, feel as if he could harm people. Was this legitimate? Could he actually hurt people? And, we've seen a lot of films, let's say maybe this year, where there were some bad guys and they weren't anybody that I was scared of. I personally didn't have a fear factor um with these characters in, let's say, in films earlier this year. Catherine, did you feel that this character, the bad guy, was bad enough? Was he scary? Did he feel as if he could do some real damage?
Well, in scenes like this, where he's like totally possessed and jacked, it felt like, yeah, he could probably do some damage. And it's like, do you really need? And again, it's like, I get that he's possessed and he's sort of doing this at the bidding of somebody else, but like, do you really need to go through with all this? You could beat Aquaman, like he says. Once he held the trident, he gained like supernatural abilities as well. Like he's stronger than he was before. It's like, well, you could just fight Aquaman without the suit, and Aquaman even says that at some point. What, you gonna fight me? You really need that thing to fight me at this point? Uh, and that's what I kind of was getting disappointed by, is that they kept deviating for this whole other story about the Lost Kingdom and the possession. And it's like, dude, use your powers and stuff to do what you said you were going to do: burn Atlantis to the ground and go after Arthur's family. And it felt, and use Orm to that extent, because again, Orm is the one who's partly responsible for this. And given Orm loves Atlantis more than anything else, he would lay his life on the line for it. Which is why early in the movie, when Orm and Arthur are in the little pod driving towards Atlantis, he says, "Yeah, maybe you should leave this, in charge of somebody who knows what he's doing." And he didn't say it as like a snide remark. You could tell he actually meant it, because he actually cares about Atlantis and wants to help them. And I was hoping they'd push that angle a little more than the totally bro type of stuff that they just did the whole time. Uh, Oh yeah, totally agreed, Scott. I saw the trailer in IMAX because I saw Godzilla -1 in IMAX, which is great, and they had a trailer for Aquaman 2 in IMAX, and there was just so much stuff on the screen. It's like, I can't see this in IMAX. I'm just gonna see this in a regular theater. But yeah, in
Yeah.
this image, yeah, I'd say I agree with you that he does look like a guy who could actually do real damage and is a threat, but they didn't lean into that as much.
Yeah, and he didn't feel even from day one, let's say, he didn't feel like he was an individual at any point. So we didn't necessarily see him. We got the flashback, which I have to give them credit for doing. So you didn't really even need to see the first Aquaman in order
That
to
was
watch.
something they should have put in the trailer to remind casual fans. Oh, like why? Like if you watch the first trailer, you'd be forgiven for wondering, wait, why does this guy want to kill Aquaman again? It's like that should have been in the trailer, and I'm glad they put it in the movie for those who wouldn't, like, remember that.
And I certainly am not expecting people to remember all the details from the first Aquaman, and I almost feel, and I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, but it doesn't necessarily feel like, as if this does feel like a pickup from the end of the first film to the next film. And I guess they chose to do that because they felt it was important. They felt that they wanted the two to be together somehow, but I don't think it was absolutely necessary to do that. And I am happy with this bad guy character. I did like the parts where he's holding this black trident, whatever it is called, this thing, and you get these visions. And it does. Initially, when I was watching it, Catherine, I did not understand that he was becoming possessed. Of course, unless you know the history and you know that that's what was happening, I get it. But I did like that depending upon the holder of the Black Trident, you may get a different vision. And I like that they did that. They didn't have to do that. However, it's very dangerous item. And even this shot, like when they choose to put specific photographs, and like on IMDb, for example, you can see he's holding it in his hand. And I do like that where you can kind of see like it's green and his eyes are green and you're like, yeah, something's off. He looks very good. He looks strong. He looks, very, very powerful here. And I felt like that was important for us to see as well.
Well, yeah, because you get how he's totally, it's influencing him. Not even if it's not a literal possession. It's like he's like the Korvax, as it's later revealed to be, tells him, "Oh, if you help me escape, I'll give you everything you need to kill Aquaman." Whereas with Orm, in the end of the movie, he tells him, "Oh, if you do this, I'll give you the throne of Atlantis and have all the power of my armies and everything you need to wage war on the surface." So it's like, literal deal with the devil, where the devil promises you everything, but really is going to give you nothing.
Certainly. And Hill CT talks about it being, yeah, of course I'm going to be positive. Positive fandom, remember? Did you forget? This is positive fandom. Gary Vando Sanders says very hypnotic vibe.
Kryptonic.
Oh, excuse me, kryptonic vibe. Thank you, Catherine, for correcting that for me. Yes, and Bonzo says, "Isn't that the guy from the Watchmen TV show?" I don't know if it's from the Watchmen TV show, but of course, Patrick Wilson is was in The Watchmen, the movie, which was the movie that got me into going online and reviewing movies. That was the one, the turning point for me when it comes to wanting to look at superheroes. It was The Watchmen. So I love seeing Patrick Wilson come back each and every time. He himself looks like, I do appreciate Jason Momoa, and people have talked about this, but I think that either he or Alan Richardson could have also played Aquaman. So I think that if they had done that, we would have had a very different type of character.
Well, people have been talking about how in this movie, Orm almost looks more like the classic version of Aquaman from the comics, and because he's more mature and disciplined in this movie, like he tells him right up front that when this is over, I'll help you do this, because we have to obviously stop Manta and save Atlantis. But I will go back to the prison, surrender myself to go back to that horrible prison, because that will be me maintaining my Atlantean honor. Like, he actually is legit. So, like, whereas in the first movie, he's totally like cookie cutter from the comics, Ocean Master, looks just like him. Whereas here, it's like he feels a lot more like he is the classic. He's like, yeah, you're kind of like the original Aquaman, and you're now paired with the whole Bromoa version of it.
Yeah, it is very funny, isn't it, Catherine? And I think that they're playing up on that because as we're watching the film, and I could be totally wrong about this, but when you look at it, even in this shot, Catherine, there were scenes where Jason Momoa is in his ordinary clothes and Patrick Wilson is in more of the suit that we would expect, let's say, the Atlanteans to wear. And I thought it was a very interesting contrast. We even hear throughout the film Momoa say things like, well, I don't know anything about that, or I don't know the history, or, and it is kind of interesting that they're not going to try and convince you that this particular Aquaman knows everything. They don't want to do that. They want to keep him to a point where he just doesn't know everything. And he needs the Atlanteans and all the other people to help him out to figure out what needs to be done. And it kind of works, I think, in a sense, but it was a little strange seeing Momoa swimming around like in his regular street clothes. I would call it street clothes, right? In his regular street clothes was odd, especially at heightened points where there was fighting going on. What did you think about that?
It was a little odd. I mean, I don't know if that was like a budget issue, because they didn't want him wearing, because the costume obviously has some, the CG tinkering to it, and so I don't. Whereas Patrick Wilson's there, you could tell is not just him in the suit. So I don't know if that was them also just pushing his personality in this movie, being more laid back and wanting you to look at Orm as being the more, professional one of them, so you buy more into the idea that these guys are actually on equal footing. Because if you had Momoa all clean cut in his classic Aquaman outfit, you'd be all on his side and would still be thinking of Orm as, oh yeah, you're the psycho who wanted to commit, genocidal war against Earth or against the surface. Whereas here, it's like they sort of caked over, because like I mentioned earlier, it's like Orm should be upset with him. Like, dude, everything I feared came to pass. Half of Atlantis apparently still supports him, as Arthur mentions at one point. The council wants to go to war with the surface. So it's like, if anything, he should. It's prime for him to take over again, and instead he's just kind of chillaxed. And I think that's partly why they put Momoa in the regular street clothes to make them feel a bit more somewhat equal footing, get you to look at Orm almost like he's the. You can kind of see what their mother said. I want you guys to get along. You're both really kingly material.
Yeah, and that's what's so weird about it in a sense, and I'm not digging the film or anything like this for this, but that's what made it so weird at the end because I thought Orm was gonna hang around and then he kind of jumps into the water. And guys, there are spoilers, so I do want to mention there's spoilers. He jumps into the water and he kind of like has to lay low. And I'm thinking to myself, no, this is a time you just helped save everyone. This is a time for you to come back and assert yourself and take over. I was surprised when he was like, well, you're not, he's telling his brother, you're not such a bad king. I'm like, no, you should tell him, look, this might not be the thing for you. Go off, spend time with your family. Don't worry about ruling the kingdom. I can take over this. When your kid is grown, then you can come in if you want to and rule for a few years. I honestly thought that's what was going to happen, Catherine. So
Yeah,
I
because it's also strange on top of that that throughout the movie, King Nerys keeps giving Orm all this shit, and it's like, excuse me, you knew he staged the submarine attack. You helped him. You killed the Fisherman King's guards when Orm tried to kill the king, and you left a living witness in the princess. And so, why you didn't get sent to prison for this, I don't know, because you're just as guilty of this as Orm is, and yet he's totally against him throughout almost the whole movie. And you're right. Once we get to the ending, it's like, well, apparently Orm changed his mind about surrendering himself back to maintain his Atlantean honor, and they're like, oh, we'll just lie and say you're dead. And it's like, well, you did just save the world from Black Manta and the Lost Kingdom, which is massive. So yeah, they could have brought him back. So that was a little odd that, oh, let's hope nobody finds him anymore as he goes doing his own thing, which is just kind of weird, admittedly.
Yeah, it was. And this was another thing that I do want to ask, and I'm kind of going out of order, but Scott Bartholomew talks about the global warming subplot, and certainly we saw some interesting things that happened, Catherine, when the Earth started to warm, and apparently it wasn't just about Earth warming, was it? There were things like mutations that were taking place on Earth, and that was a big no-no. But it so reminded me of sort of like the Lost World, almost as if the mutations, things were going back in time, like
Mhm.
where it's a high oxygenated atmosphere, and therefore organisms could get gigantism and then, become very deadly. That part where he eats the roach, I almost wondered whether that was like one of those sea roaches,
Mhm.
those, and it was just like, it just went on and on and on. I didn't even know that was going to be in there. What did you think about that? Because I didn't really care. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a global warming plot. I don't really like global warming plots, but I did like the
Well,
crazy mutations. What did you think?
well, it's on brand for the Aquaman stuff. I mean, I don't get why people. Yeah, a lot of the Aquaman comics have environmentalist bends to it. They always have. And he's using the global warming things. His goal is he's trying to melt the polar ice caps to thaw out the Lost Kingdom. That's the whole point. And speaking of which, the Lost Kingdom itself has another obvious major literary allusion, which is H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, where you have this whole ancient city frozen in Antarctica, with these Lovecraftian like monsters that you see here in the actual Lost Kingdom in the movie. So it's like that's kind of neat how they're leaning into that. I just uh, and so but again, it's like a Black Manta. You by the time they're burning all this stuff in the furnace, you already have enough resources to kill Aquaman and get back, and it doesn't feel like he ever really gets back to that. Um, is this movie as weak as people are saying? No, I don't think Performing Artist. I don't think it's a dumpster fire like they're saying. I've noticed that a lot of reviews are focused on how it doesn't feel like the big climax to the DCU, and it's like, well, it was never meant to be. By the time they filmed it, it was just going to be the next installment. It wasn't supposed to be the ending. And James Wan had said from the beginning it was originally a world building exercise, which is why they go to all these different places. And some of the reshoots had to revolve around ending Aquaman's story and ending the conflict with Black Manta rather than expounding on it and pushing it even further. Which is why certain aspects of the ending kind of goes the way it does. But scattershot video game plotting, cool, but I still thought it was fun. and yes, admittedly, a couple of atrocious lines of dialogue, but I didn't think it was a total dumpster fire.
Yeah, I agree, as well, Catherine. I certainly don't view it as a dumpster fire. I think that it was really a film that you were meant to kinda just enjoy, and I don't think they want you to take any of this stuff too seriously, and
No,
certainly they want you to have fun looking at all the different effects and, seeing, the discovery of this new, or let's say hidden secret,
yeah,
kingdom that was there, and now it's been discovered, and, now that it's been discovered, things will change. One of the other elements of the story was how all of a sudden um they want to reveal themselves to, let's say the rest of the world. And that seemed to be such an important part of this story as well. I think that I'm sorry, go ahead.
even that was weird because in the beginning of the movie, he wants to do that and he can't because the council is constantly overruling him.
Yes.
But at the end, it suddenly just happens. And it's like, well, why? Because Black Manta has still accelerated global warming extremely and all this pollution and toxin and all that kind of stuff. And they don't really resolve that problem. He just decides to reveal Atlantis to the world and say, with the UN, we need a partner to get over our differences and work together to solve the problem or whatever. And I get it because they're trying to end Aquaman's story, but um, that felt like something that was probably in the reshoots because that would be more or less the end of the entire Aquaman story rather than, as close to the beginning. But that was another contradiction. It's like, oh, I can't get anything done because the council won't let me. And after pissing them off with the revelation that one of his surface enemies is the one who's responsible for all this, oh, now he can go up there and, reveal Atlantis and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, that doesn't really make as much sense, but I guess that's what we're doing.
Absolutely, and I am listening to a bunch of you guys out in the chat, where you had different opinions about the film. Some of you guys liked it, some of you guys didn't. Yeah, and one person says, "Fun fact, I guess, to be politically correct, no one was unclothed throughout the film." Well, those suits are very form fitting anyway, Stavros. Something to think about when it comes to, this type of a film.
I don't really recall in most superhero movies, you don't see them people like unclothed. I don't think that's a PC thing. I think that's just these types of superhero movies are made for more family audiences, and they're puritanical America doesn't want to lean into that type of stuff. Oh, it's a big taboo, but I don't think that's unique to this film necessarily.
Absolutely. I also wanted to mention that as I was watching the film, um, and you talked about having, Shin, we saw, who was this guy who's supposed to be the scientist, and eventually, guys, there are spoilers. So there are spoilers, just so you know. I'm going to be saying some things that are in the film. At some point, the baddie needs to kidnap or wants to kidnap the baby in order to use the baby at some point. And, there's this thing where they have to rush home and get the child who's being guarded by his grandfather, played by Tamura
Yeah,
Morrison.
because that's another thing. It's like, okay, we have to find Manta. They stop his evil, melting the polar ice caps plot briefly. And then you'll notice that when the scientists first told Orm and Aquaman about the Black Trident, they didn't they didn't know what that meant. And then once Orm touches it and he sees the memory, it's like this whole gobbledygook exposition. It's like this feels like exposition we should have got at the beginning of the movie, not right before the third act, because now we suddenly want you to care about all of this other stuff. And oh well, he needs the blood of his brother. He needs his own blood. And since the king of this kingdom was the brother of King Atlan, and of course Arthur is a descendant. Arthur and Orm are descendants of Atlan, therefore they have the bloodline in them. So we need the blood, and it's like, oh shit, that must mean he's going for the kid. And that's where you have the scene in the trailer where Manta attacked the house, and everybody lives though. The father lives, and but he took the kid, and it's like, oh, we have to. Well, yeah, true, Mikey Alito. I don't think the movie was aiming for a serious tone. Like the first movie also was funny and fun, but it still felt like it had its good, serious, dramatic moments, so that it felt more like almost like a legit movie that was finding its key. Whereas this one just like, I think one of the most dramatic points in the whole movie actually is when Arthur and Orm are walking through the jungle, and Orm reveals that the reason he had such prejudice against Aquaman in the first movie was because his father taught him his whole life that you have this half brother out there who has no respect for the discipline of the throne or anything, but he has all the ambitions, just going to take it from you. And Arthur's like, no, I just took it because I wanted to stop you from waging a genocidal war on the surface. And Orm And Arthur just turns its back after that and continues walking through the jungle, and Orm is just totally like
Shocked.
it rocked his world. He totally is shocked by that, and that helps them build that. But they don't do anything with it. It's like they drop it and they immediately go back to the broy comic, jokey stuff. And I'm like, you could have gotten a lot of good dramatic mileage out of that, and there's not. Like I would feel like again, that's where I felt the movie should have leaned more into Orm initially, perhaps wanting to take the throne back, because like, look what you've done to the kingdom and all of this, and then finding out that that's not at all what Arthur's like. That would be what would mend the relationship through bro. But it's not. It's just being very goofy. It's not trying to be serious. They let Jason Momoa basically play himself in this movie as opposed to the Arthur Curry he played in the first film. And
Yes.
so everything is just, even you think about it, Orm doesn't really contribute much to the story. They break him out to help him find Manta. They have the whole, Return of the Jedi tribute, as I call it, where you have the singers in the club with Martin Short voicing the kingfish, as they call him, and he's they're trying to get information. And my friend pointed out the other night that, given that this is the same realm of where King Shark comes from, that would be an ample. That should have been King Shark character that they were talking to, not some weird CG flabbery fish thing. But in a sense, it's kind of a redundancy to get him out of jail, because as we see with the scientist, he has the ability to hit the transmitter and he's constantly mulling it over, and eventually he does that. So I was just expecting that Orm was going to end up contributing something far more significant to the story, and he never really does. Like I thought he was going to like maybe make the sacrifice play to save the kid, or make the sacrifice, because at the very end when Black Manta's hanging off a fisher, I'm like, oh, I know what's going to happen here. He's going to take Aquaman's hand, pretending to go, and he's going to get that knife, that same knife that he got in the beginning of the first movie to try and fish him, and Orm is probably going to leap him into a bear hug, and they're both going to, go down and die for it or something. And no, it was like a tacked on thing, because once again, just like in the first movie, we got to toss Black Manta aside before we get. Well, in this case, they wait until you get to the climax, but they toss him aside and turn it into, Aquaman versus Orm, and then them versus this weird, Korvax guy. And I'm waiting for David Kane to get up and become a part of this, and it never really happens. It's like these two movies started with that rivalry. It was the first action scene, David Kane, you have to save us. Oh yeah, you beg the sea for mercy, and the father telling him you have to live so you can kill that son of a bitch. That's what you started with. So here we're ending the second movie. Black Manta's pushing, but it's not. It doesn't end up being about that, which is kind of frustrating. It's like finish that through line, and they don't really do it. And instead of accepting Aquaman's help in the end, Black Manta opts to do the whole Emotep thing from Mummy Returns, where he's just gonna throw himself off the cliff into the hellish depths of Necros, because he can't stand the idea of being saved by Aquaman. He doesn't want to suffer that indignity. He would rather die. And yeah, I believe that he would rather do that, but I think he would have tried a little harder first.
Yeah, and it was just too convenient hanging there. And I do agree with Mike Alito 100% that this film was not supposed to be taken seriously. Absolutely nothing in it was meant to that. You're supposed to be doing a lot of oohs and ahs, and isn't that interesting? Even the part where they go and requisition every freaking whale in the freaking ocean, Catherine, you're all you're supposed to be thinking is, wow, that's a lot of whales. And that's it. Like, I'm sure there's somebody who's like, well, are there enough whales to make enough frequency to counteract that frequency? Like,
because in the first movie they made better use of Arthur's ability to communicate with animals, because he brings them all, like even the trench, to fight Orm's Ocean Master's army. Whereas here, the only thing he really uses the communicating with the fish for is twice. One, it's to overcome Manta's weapon to get into the kingdom by counteracting the frequency. And secondly, it's how he hears his kid calling, crying in agony as Manta was about to kill him. Yes, he refers to Orm as Loki and says, "And once we're finished, I'll throw you back in Azkaban." Like, yeah, that was kind of funny.
It was funny, and I think that they're trying to hit cultural norms or cultural trends, I think, in the film, or ideas or things that we might have even seen recently. And, maybe they had a list of a top 100 cultural references, maybe even pop culture references, and said, we got to make sure that we have all 100 in this film so that anybody who sees this can have a laugh and relate to the film and walk out of there saying, well, I did kind of like that joke where he said, or did you see that so-and-so did whatever? They wanted to hit a lot of different pressure points. I think they did hit a lot of pressure points. And to be honest with you, I don't really have a problem if this film is just supposed to be a lighthearted foray, even if we are talking about this incredibly important curse that apparently.
That's the thing. It's like I wonder if it would have just been better since even when the reshoots came in, they knew that this wasn't going to reference any of the other DCEU properties. So why not just let James Wan make it the fun movie it was going to be rather than forcing these arbitrary and like people understand that the DCU is ending. Then just let this movie be whatever it was going to be. And yes, I agree 100% Johnny Skinwalker. I wish the Trench movie happened because he would have, that was the great sequence in the first one. I would have loved to see that or more of that type of stuff in here because the first trailer for this movie gave somewhat darker vibes. Like Manta's got this really, macabre gothic trident resurrecting the dead. We need to find Manta, like something really dark and evil is happening. And yet you watch the movie and it's got this polar opposite goofy tone all the way through it and being funny. Yeah, the cockroaches, that was funny too. But and I feel that maybe it would have been more like that first trailer if they didn't have to do all these reshoots to accommodate the fact that this is going to end the franchise as opposed to continue it. And I'm surprised because I don't think the movie is bad enough to justify Warner Brothers just completely abandoning it. Like they canceled the red carpet premiere in Los Angeles. They just did this really cheap fan reception where they get photo ops with Momoa across at this bar across the street from the theater, and then they went across the street into the auditorium. James Wan gave this really nice, passionate speech, and they didn't turn the camera around to show how many people were in the auditorium. But when people started clapping afterwards, it sounded like there were maybe 10 people in there. It's like there was no fanfare for this. I mean, they had some bigger premieres overseas, but and I think like you mentioned with this movie leaning more into Polynesian culture, it'll do well over there. But even in post-pandemic, we know it can't get $1 billion because most of that money came from China the first time around, and over half their theaters closed permanently after COVID. So, it's even though it made $4.5 million Thursday night previews, which is pretty good. And so maybe it'll have some legs over the holiday. It'll be here for a while, but I'm still surprised that Warner, because they didn't have character posters. There haven't been TV spots. I mean, they've been putting this trailer on every movie that's been coming out for a while now, but a lot of people haven't been going to the movies lately. So how many people even know this movie's coming out right now?
Yeah, that is something that is very interesting, is how it does feel as if this is they just snuck this in during the Christmas season when normally this would have been one of the biggest campaigns ever for a holiday film coming out. Aquaman Part 2, like it should have just been everywhere you turn on the TV.
Even the other day, like Momoa gave an interview and he was asked about Aquaman and the possibility of doing more of them. And rather than pepping up the movie and supporting it like you should, he's like, I don't know, man, it's looking really bad and blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, you have to sell this and get behind it. There was another executive at Warner Brothers who said the other day that, oh, we're behind him. If the fans love it, we'll make another one. It's like saying all the stuff you should be saying, even though we all understand there's not going to be another Aquaman movie. But you got to get behind your own movie. And when the lead actor isn't even getting behind it, I mean, he's been going on tour a lot lately for his the liquor or the whiskey or whatever type of drink it is that he owns that he's been selling and doing a lot of public appearances selling this drink. But they haven't been doing a lot of publicity for Aquaman. And it's like, come on, man, you got to sell this because there's another hidden pitfall that they're not talking about, which is if people watch this and they see that it's just Momoa, if they announce next month that he's going to be playing Lobos or in the new DC universe, which initially people were kind of excited about. It's like, will people be as excited to see that if they see that he kind of turned Arthur Curry into just the bohemian, hippie Momoa rather than Arthur Curry? It's like, is that something we should be worried about now? Because that could have a, negative effect on that potentially. Which is why, again, you got to push your movie and be positive about your movie. And I'm not feeling many of those vibes because, again, it's not very good. It's not great, but it's not as bad to the point that it should be, virtually abandoned by the studio. I think it's better than that.
I agree. And Scott Bartholomew talks about how the Kingfish scene reminded him of the cantina in Mos Eisley. I absolutely had that same feel.
Mm-hmm.
And Stavros says he likes the pirate isle and the whole scope. Obviously, of course, not only was I thinking of Mos Eisley, but of course I was thinking about Pirates of the Caribbean. And you couldn't help but think about so many of these other popular films. But even here, where he kind of is supposed to go into the desert, and he wears this special suit and they give him this thing where he has to break out his brother. And it does feel like as if he's stepping away from from the Aquaman character even. And although in the previous film, he was in the desert for quite some time.
Well, yeah,
However,
'cause this
this
is the same. It's the Kingdom of the Deserters, and it's like the same type of catacombs he was in the first movie. It's just like another
yes,
area, and it's prison
yes.
this time.
Exactly, but for some reason, it felt as if he was stepping away from Aquaman. Now, I'm not quite sure where I got that feeling, Catherine, because I didn't get that in the first film, and I'm almost wondering if the overall tone in this movie, as you had said, where he plays Murray in the first one, now he's not anymore. He's so already so far gone into this new character, this new stage of life, if you will, of the way he's interpreting the character, that it's not easily connectable to the first movie necessarily.
Well, yeah,
So
because even
that's
at the end of the first one, the last thing he tells his brother is, "When you're ready, we should talk." And one of the first things we find out in this movie is, oh, I'd rather not have a brother or whatever, because his dad says, oh, you should really have another son or whatever, or a daughter for your kid to have somebody to play with, because he remembers how lonely it was for Arthur growing up, not having any siblings. And he's like, Dad, you don't have to feel bad about that. And it'd be much better having you as a dad and being alone than having to have Orm as a brother because he's such a dick. It's like, so clearly you didn't hash out and talk with your brother, because you could tell Aquaman had some understanding for why Orm did what he did by the end of the first movie and was somewhat respectful of that. But now here he's just totally abandoned, doesn't even care. And it's like, this doesn't feel like a continuation of the first movie so much as it's, let's take a joke that they do right in the beginning, in fact, when he's raiding the shipping container to free them from the pirates. And right as the action's about to start, it cuts to Aquaman, or cuts to Arthur smashing action figures together. And he's like, yeah, and then I fought. Blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what this movie is. It's picking the characters from the previous film and just putting them in fun environments with crazy action and not much adherence to continuity or the story. And just, but again, I've seen other movies like this and they're still fun. They're not dumpster fires. Yes, it could easily have been better and been like a B grade 4 out of 5 type movie. And instead I just downgraded it to like 3 out of 5. It's like, it's okay, but it's frustrating. It could have been better. And maybe it's just through all the reshoots, the only thing they could get consistent was the Bromoa aspect. Like Jason's like, I guess I'll just bring myself to this movie because nothing else seems to be working.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that is the truth. We do actually see him performing the haka, or at least what I think might be the haka, with Morrison in the film where he talks, and you can see that like was very, I think, surprising in a sense. I enjoyed it. Look, I enjoyed every moment of this film. Just to be clear, for all of you who are watching this, I enjoyed every single second of this between Patrick Wilson and Jason Momoa and Morrison, Tamora Morrison on in this film. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. But I do think it's very funny how light it is considering what we were talking about, this ancient curse. You have this curse, Catherine, that's formed, that's a spell that's, kind of sealed with blood, and the importance of this underwater, you know, nation, if you will, or location that has been hidden all this time. Thank you, Mikey Lito. Thanks for that. Um, this underwater thing, I really liked the part where Orm held the Triton and he could see the
Right.
past. I enjoyed that. I thought that was done so well. And then towards another part where he's literally holding it and Momoa's holding it. He's like, you have to let go, brother. And he does. But even at that most passionate scene, when I say passionate, intimate scene between these two brothers, where he has to say something to bring Orm back, to bring him back to this moment, right, Catherine? And even then, I had my doubts that that moment was going to happen because things were so laid back. It was
Right,
incredible.
because it's like it would make sense if he's telling him that if Orm was already on the warpath to reclaim the throne because he was upset about it, and then him saying, no, this isn't the way or something. But it wasn't, because it was too chillaxed the entire time. It's like they sprinkle in these dramatic moments, but it doesn't have the surrounding framework to support it or to really back it up. Kind of like in the very beginning or early on, they mentioned just out of hand that, oh yeah, Volko died. He died of like the plague or whatever, the toxicity, the Willem Dafoe character from the first one. And I don't know what the story is behind the scenes. Like, was there a scheduling conflict? Did he just not want to come back? I don't know. And I thought that was kind of, and that's something that doesn't seem to have an effect on him either. It's like, oh yeah, Volko, your mentor, the guy you grew, oh yeah, he's gone. And it's like, oh, okay. It's just gone. And it's funny that when Orm finally tells everybody about his vision, they're familiar with the Lost Kingdom in name only, but not with the history of it. So when he tells them the whole history of what he saw, they're initially kind of skeptical and aren't sure whether they should believe it. So it's like,
Yeah, they
well, then
don't
what did you
believe
think the
him,
Lost Kingdom
Catherine.
was if you were familiar with it, and yet you're skeptical as to whether or not he's telling the truth? It's like that's kind of confusing, and they don't bring it up till super late in the movie.
Yeah, they don't believe him. It's almost he's telling them something so profound. He couldn't make that up. And I knew nothing. I personally knew nothing about it, but they just looked at him like he was
Well, I mean,
crazy.
when he says that the records were destroyed, at the very least, they should know that the Lost Kingdom is the seventh kingdom of Atlantis, and so, or the seventh of the underwater kingdoms. So even though they're skeptical, not believing, it's like, well, the records are gone, but you do know that this Lost Kingdom is a thing because they perked up when he said that. Like even Aquaman heard kind of somewhat was familiar with the story, and they're like, "Oh, that's impossible." And it's like, well, why would it be impossible? It's like if you don't know the story, if all the records are gone, then why would it be impossible? It's like, uh, yeah, but visuals like this were really cool, and seeing again, it feels like Minas Morgul with all the green echoes out of this, and the way the palace, the Lost Kingdom palace is designed, it's so much like Minas Morgul from Lord of the Rings, and then a little bit of Barad-dûr thrown in. I'm like, oh, this is so cool to see this. I just wish at that point it was more about Black Manta wielding all of this to try and destroy Atlantis, as opposed to him being. At one point, Aquaman says, "I'm tired of dealing with your puppets," referring to Orm and Black Manta, rather than Manta being the main bad. Like he's in the comics, Manta is Aquaman's nemesis, and that this was teed in the or pitched in the trailers as being his story. Like he's the villain. This is the guy. This is the guy they teased from the very first action scene in the first Aquaman movie, and yet they're making the climax all about this guy we literally just found out about 5 minutes ago. And it just like why? It's like just how hard would it have been to just say, oh yeah, there's this black trident, you can resurrect the dead or the king or whatever with it, and that's it. And he's trying to go to war, and they have to stop or something like that. It's like instead it becomes this whole other thing that has nothing to do with what Black Manta set out to do in the beginning of the series. It's like I got to stop Aquaman. I'm going to kill him and murder his family and burn his kingdom to ash. Well, then he got possessed and kind of forgot about all that, and seemed to forget that he had more than enough power at that point to kill Aquaman. Hell, he practically killed him a couple of times in the first movie, and even in their battle in Atlantis in the beginning of this one. But now he still has to go off and do all this other stuff. And it's like, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also wanted to ask, I also loved what they did with this character and how he turned all of his subjects into also demonic characters, if you will.
Mm.
And that I said that's terrifying. Like I wouldn't, if that were my king, I wouldn't want to be one of those victimized people who was turned into that. I also wanted to ask what you thought of, the cronies for the baddie, his cronies, I've got like a picture of two of them here.
Yeah, they're
Um,
not. They seem a little off. Like they don't seem like regular. Like at first, I thought, well, maybe these again are the other pirates who have made Aquaman has made enemies of, who have joined him. But the way they're dressed, the way the look on their faces, and everything, something just seems off about them, and I can't really put my finger on. Other than the one girl, the who pilots the ship, she was a bit more normal, but I couldn't put my finger on what, like, who exactly are these people, and where did they come from, and why are most of them very weird? Because you can see the scientist is even kind of afraid. Like he only really talks with Manta, or with David Kane, and I did like, admittedly, the scientist story where he's trying to eventually he has sympathies for Aquaman and he saves the kid. And at one point he's like Aquaman and he tosses him his trident. I thought that was really cool, but I still didn't know who these other people were and what's like this, because David Kane in the comics, he's also very much an explorer. Like he's a very able-bodied guy. It's like you don't really need all these extra people. It's like you could just say he went on this expedition with the scientists. They found the Black Trident, and he's using the trident to, whip up these powers of resurrect this dead kingdom or whatever. Like you don't need these other pirates who are just kind of like when they had the whole subplot of we have to steal the fuel that we've never heard of before to melt the polar ice caps, as opposed to just using the lasers from the trident to do it. Because I mean, he kind of blasts his way through there relatively. I mean, granted, it had been melted a lot, but it's like you still kind of like, did you really need this? Because in the beginning of the movie, even when they go down into the cave, one of the monsters is already, attacking people. So, well, that monster obviously had to come down from the kingdom, which means there's a passage to get down there. So just take the trident down there and just, blast your way up. Like you don't need to go through this whole subplot of we have to burn the green, all that kind of stuff. But and I get it. They're trying to make it an adventure movie because they need to send, Bromoa and and Orm on this adventure.
Well, another thing that I was gonna say was that it had a little bit of, like, a James Bondy villain sorta feel.
Yeah.
Where he's not exactly his motivation doesn't seem to make any I'm not gonna say it doesn't make any sense. Like, he money doesn't mean anything to him perhaps as somebody who has power, right?
Mhm.
So, he has some other odd reason why he's doing something, but it had that kind of weird feel to it, and I think maybe they looked at some of the things, from years gone by and tried to pick certain things. They said, "Okay, we wanna make this look cool. Let's pull this from a Bond film, or let's pull this from a whatever film and incorporated it into Aquaman 2." I think that there were some things I can't put my finger on it, Catherine, but there were certain things in it that reminded me of that, and I said, "This is a little cool, kinda slick looking," maybe not necessarily, something that isn't associated with Atlanteans, but it kind of had, like, a different type of feel that I was not expecting. So, I think they wanted you to have this it's like a joyride, if you will, if you had to
Yeah.
deal with this sort of thing.
But
Um
yeah, that goes back, like I mentioned, they add the whole subplot in there seemingly for the sake of sending Aquaman and or Arthur and Orm on this little adventure to different places. Like even the whole Kingfish segment, which is like Jabba the Hutt, Mos Eisley, whatever, is something that's like maybe a 6 minute, 7 minute segment of the movie, but it's world building and sending them places for the sake of just sending them places because it's trying to be. Again, it was meant to be a world building film because they were planning to do more installments of these characters and just make it feel like an adventure. Somebody said it's like Journey to the Mysterious Island type thing, and that's kind of what they're doing here. Even though, like I mentioned, Black Manta being the firm explorer, almost Doc Savage type in the comics, doesn't really need all these extra people and bells and whistles to do what he wants to do. They're just having him do all that because they're trying to build a bigger plot out of it rather than have it be, like I assumed from watching the trailers that one of the first things Manta was going to do at the beginning was just go attack the lighthouse on his own without necessarily using his tech
Right,
and kill.
right.
I thought he was going to kill Arthur's father in that instance, and that the kid would just be in Atlantis or something. And that was, this, like when you see the trailer when Aquaman's running up and he's, oh my god, like I thought that was going to be how he, announces his return. Like, yeah, that's right, but you didn't kill me. I just killed your father type thing. Uh, and instead, it's just kind of, well, we got to go on this whole thing with this whole thing, and it's like, okay. And again, like I said, the visuals are neat, like the Lost Kingdom. I'm not complaining. That place looks cool, but did we need to do all the other stuff? Well, because it's the fun broy adventure. I just feel like it needed to hit the pause button a few times to, like, every time they had to have an important dialogue scene where it wasn't action packed, they used the minimal amount of dialogue possible to race through it to get to the next thing. It's like in such a race, like kind of like the Marvels. We have to zip to the next the next action scene. Doesn't matter. And that's kind of like what this movie's doing a bit.
Yeah, that's an excellent comparison, and perhaps, they took a sense of tone from it as well, where they wanted to keep it light. They didn't wanna go for too much. Also wanna thank James who says, "Thanks for talking about this. You too. Happy holidays." Thanks so much.
Now, this one I would say is a significantly better movie than the Marvels, though. This holds together much better than that, I would say.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that too, and I think the thing with the Marvels, although you and I didn't review it together, I think, for the Marvels, it certainly was what I call a chick flick. It's 3 close friends who have kind of, drifted apart, are brought together to fight a common foe. That's the film. That's the Marvels. Like, and
Yeah,
it
except for the
had
young
a
girl who's never really been friends with these other two. It's like, hi.
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get
I'm
it. Yeah,
not.
it's that kind of thing.
And I thought to myself, had I known this, I could have, like, called up some of my friends, we could have gotten some wine and cheese and just, like,
Yeah.
chatted through the whole thing and just enjoyed the film for what it was, which felt like kind of a chick flick kind
Well,
of
you
film.
still do that once it hits Disney Plus.
Yeah,
Fight 'em over.
absolutely. Absolutely,
Oh, we can
Catherine.
do a watch party on here, and we'll have our own little cheese and crackers and drinks as we're watching it.
I might hold you to that, Catherine. I think I
Okay.
will hold you to that. And I think it is also very interesting, to I did, in regards to Nicole Kidman, who looked fantastic in the film, she was great, uh, in the film.
I thought she was gonna have more to do as well because it was such a big deal when they saw her alive at the end. All the other Atlanteans kneeling immediately to the queen, and she's barely in it. Like the first scene she really shows up in is when she's talking with Arthur's plan about, oh, we have to get Orm and tell him that I love you, and then you don't really see her again until Arthur or until Thomas gets attacked at the house, and that's almost the last time you see her until the little brief montage at the very very end. And I thought she was going to have a bigger role. Particularly with Arthur, you would think you'd want to make some changes to some of the culture, saying no, you should never have banished her simply because of the king's petty jealousy, which is a lot. When I rewatched the first movie 2 nights ago to prepare for this one, I was kind of waiting for Arthur to tell Orm that, hey, I'm not the reason Mom's dead. Her petty jealous husband is the reason she's dead. The reason she's dead. But they still banished her. The fact that the rest of Atlantis was fine with that, I would have expected Aquaman to kind of change some of their culture in some way, or try and find a way to. But that's also another thing the movie doesn't really do. You don't really get to meet or greet and understand the people of Atlantis that much. Like in the first
Yes.
movie, you pretty much only see them at the arena, and in this movie, you see them during the big chase sequence with Manta, and that's about it. So, I mean, for all their talk about Atlantis, we have to protect it. We don't really get to spend much time there with the everyday people of Atlantis.
Yeah, and I as far as I'm concerned, Amber did a good job, as Mira again. So,
Yeah,
I
she's
felt
fine. She's just there. It's like, okay. I didn't feel like the role was reduced. It's like, yes, Manta injures her in the big action scene when he comes to attack Atlantis, or comes to steal from Atlantis. But when she shows up later in the movie at the island, it's sort of framed like it's supposed to be a surprise. And certainly that wouldn't have been in one of the reshoots. It felt like something that was probably in the script, because like Jason said from the beginning, they pitched this story as being Orm and Arthur going on a quest together. It wasn't really about them, so I didn't feel the role was reduced or intrusive at all. It was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. Yeah, the Trident and the King needed time to wake up. It wasn't carried or used for centuries.
I think you make such a good point, Catherine, when you talk about how they kept the Atlantean cultures kind of like away from us and we didn't learn anything about it. And, I don't know whether that was done purposefully or because of time, because it would take some time to explain to us, you know, very specific details and things that we'd want to know. They did feel as if they were, all the groups, let's say, kept to themselves. And I don't know, when they suddenly showed up to support Arthur, I was surprised. I'm like, where did they come from? Like, why are they here? And I realized that it was probably the mother or Mira who encouraged them that we have to act. At least that's my belief. But it would have been nice or for at least to see a little something more about the other groups again. But it does feel like as if, even though they claim they're going to share and reveal themselves to reveal themselves to the surface. Sorry, guys. um, it does.
Surprise! The father ship should just expose themselves to flash them and they go back underwater. That was good.
Sorry.
That was funny. That's good.
Well,
Certainly the Brine King. He doesn't wear any clothes.
And we're laughing this hard about this film. I think it does certainly tell you guys it's meant for you to have a laugh, to have fun. Do not overthink this film or look it. Nobody I think when they made the film, they were proud of what they made and wanted you to just have fun and walk out of that theater. I think that there is a lot more to reveal about it. The other thing I was going to say is Stavros talks about the flowing hair. I'm known for my billowing hair, but I would love an effect if I could do that with my hair. But I did like it. There was a lot of details in it that felt legitimate, as if they were underwater, as if they, were these beings that had power. And a lot of times, Catherine, I've been noticing in some of these films that we're seeing individuals with superpowers or not superpowers or with something, and it's not consistent where they have a certain amount of power, but I feel as if they've maintained the consistency, at least for these individuals. And I like that, where we're not kind of like seeing something that doesn't make sense or why is that happening. Things are explained when there's an amplification or a reduction in power, and we're not kind of like left thinking, gee, well, why was someone able to do that? Why did somebody have that power? We didn't get that.
Yeah.
That confusion. I also think it was very funny that they chose very specific places to show where they were going to say, present themselves as Atlanteans, if you will, throughout the globe, and this notion of we have to be here and we have to be there, and we need to see them on a regular basis, which was excellent. But some people were saying, everybody survived, like everybody survived. You know, um, it feels
Yeah,
kind of.
I did think that Thomas was going to die at the house. I thought that was going to be, and I thought Orm was going to die by making, the sacrifice play for the kid or whatever. But then, no, and and even I thought the mid credit scene was funny. Where he goes, it's like the waitress tells Orm, "Here's your cheeseburger, extra greasy, like you asked," and it's like he's eating it and he's kind of enjoying it, and he puts the cockroaches. I thought, okay, that's funny. It doesn't need to tie into the DCU or anything like that because this is, Aquaman movie. Let it play in its own sandbox. But yeah, again, if they could have added a more serious, somewhat darker tone, like they teased in the first trailer, if they'd wanted to. But it was like tonally a bit different. Movie was going in different directions. But
It really was. And with that being said, I don't feel as if the advertisement of the film, the marketing of it was any different from what we got, truthfully. I do believe that what they showed us with Jason Momoa and Patrick on the poster standing together, kind of, looking at us. I don't feel as if we got something dramatically different from what was advertised or presented. So this is something that I can't say was the truth for a lot of films that I see. And I think that if it's just more sort of like them standing together on a more united front, and that's what the poster implies, which I think it does. That's
yeah,
exactly
but
what we
they do certainly. At least Aquaman has looking totally like almost too deadly serious on the poster and on most of the posters, and it's like, well, maybe they should have them both crashing at a mini bar or something in the post.
well,
Feeling.
that's yeah, and I think that it could also be called, Atlantean Rulers Night Out, or
Yeah,
you know, what what else would you
road
call it?
trip. Aquaman 2, the road trip.
Yes, yes. I think if that's going to be, like say a sense, because for them, this is just an ordinary, time. For us, this is remarkable, but for them, this is their normal day to day thing. And yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Mike Alito. A buddy adventure. Why not go and check it out over the holiday? It's no different than, and I kind of was joking about the chick flick, but I was watching movie choices, and they had three friends celebrate Christmas together, after, many years apart, or, this could be the case too. Two brothers meet up again for an adventure of a lifetime. You don't want to miss this one, that sort of thing. And it really did kind of feel that way. Stavros says, yeah, marketing wasn't a lie, but we didn't get spoiled with Wonder Woman and Superman like past movies. No, we didn't. We didn't.
See,
And this is
that's a
not.
surprising thing because with Black Adam, the numbers were doing so bad that's why they spoiled the Superman cameo because they felt they needed to get people to come see it in the theater. Whereas with this movie, it's almost the opposite, where it's like they gave you very little in terms of marketing. I thought the second trailer felt spoilery, and then it turned out it really wasn't. Because I thought the second trailer leaned more into the idea that Thomas was going to die, and that like they actually had the part where Aquaman says, "Get away from my son," when he's shouting at Manta, and Orm is standing there. And they made a point of using a shot where you could see Orm standing there, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, so Orm's going to make the play. But then, oh, that didn't happen. But then again, there's no cameos or other things to really spoil in this movie. It's just kind of like Guardians 3. It has nothing to do. That had nothing to do with Marvel's Phase 4 or 5. It's its own thing, and this Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is also very much its own thing. Like like they say, it takes place like years after the first one, but also after the Flash when the timeline was reset. But as far as we could tell, there's nothing reset in Aquaman's universe, as far as we know. Because this is apparent in this reset universe, as we know. Spoilers for the Flash. George Clooney is now Batman in that in that reset universe, but nothing really changed in terms for the Aquaman universe, as far as we could tell. So it's like, yeah, it's very much its own thing. I don't think it's fair that people are judging it as, oh, this is the final installment of the DCEU. It has to live up to our lofty expectations. Like, no, it doesn't. Let it be its own thing. It's a fun Aquaman movie in the sandbox. if you liked the zany world of the first movie, yeah, you might be a little disappointed that it's not doesn't measure up in terms of storytelling to the first one as much. But I'm not gonna lie, it's a fun movie, and uh, I did have some fun with it, and it was neat seeing it on the big screen because there were so many visuals and stuff to see that it was worth seeing. Not on too big a screen like IMAX, but a big enough of a screen that I still had some fun with it.
Yeah, and Mikey Lito says, "Wait for it to stream." I think it was worth going to see. I enjoyed, as I said, every minute of it. It was an impressive road trip film for this. And I
I
think
will pick up the 4K Steelbook if they put one out to complete my DCEU Steelbook set.
absolutely. So I personally would recommend the film. I think it's a great closure film, and it's meant to be light. It's meant to be just enjoyable, and that's what this film is. So for those of you who want something light and fun and want to enjoy Aquaman, fine. If you are a Momoa fan, you will love this film. You're gonna love it. If you are
Oh
Patrick
yeah,
Wilson,
if you're a Momoa fan, this is like a good hangout movie.
yes,
Obviously, there's
yes.
not much of a. I mean, there's lots of plot points, but it's like you could just sit back and be drinking in the background and just have this on, and it's like hanging out with Momoa and Patrick Wilson, and that in that way. So yes, it's a fun hangout movie.
Absolutely. And Scott says it was a grand mall adventure. It was. Scott, I think that really is a testament to only, to be honest with you, not everybody can pull off the hangout vibe and
Mm-hmm.
get away with it. And I think Momoa gets away with it here. And they do, push it a little bit, but he gets away with it even. And Tamora was enjoyable to see too. He was even like very low key, right? Right? He was not.
Yeah, he's because again, people remember he was a great dramatic actor. A movie that put him on the map was Once We're Warriors, which is a great New Zealand film. And and most people around the world first saw him in Attack of the Clones and Star Wars and stuff. And I like that they cast him in the first Aquaman movie. In this, I kind of, and of course we've seen him more recently as Boba Fett and the Mandalorian side of things. But I liked what he did in this movie. I thought his acting here was almost better than what he did as Boba Fett lately. Because here at least you could see his face and he's emoting and everything, and he doesn't just have the helmet on most of the time. But I thought it was really good, especially like the scene when he's discussing with his son that he's almost saying that he wasn't as good of a father, and that's why he wanted him to have another kid for your sibling to have so that your kid can have somebody to play with. And he's like, no, Dad, you're like a great father. And all. It's like, so it does have its moments where that type of good acting creeps in.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you again. Mikey Lito says, happy holidays to the Burn Network audience. I'm hanging out on the Positive Fandom channel. Yes. And thank you for everybody who popped up to give their opinions about the film tonight. A film that I'm just so excited. As soon as I can see this film again, I will. Now that I know what it's like, I'm gonna go to my Regal Theater again, grab a drink and go in and just laugh and have fun. This is the, old school enjoyment on the holiday. Gee, I might even go to see this on Christmas Day, Catherine, again, because I enjoyed it so much, just to have a laugh, just to kind of have that good vibe, that good feeling. Yeah, I enjoyed this film. Catherine, I really appreciate you meeting me tonight to talk about this film that you and I have been waiting for. And I enjoyed it, and I recommend everybody go see it. It's gonna, when you if you can't go see it, watch it. You're gonna enjoy it. It's not anything that is unenjoyable. It is light, and don't expect more than that, everybody, from this film. It's not an end game. So Catherine, your final thoughts on the film before we close out.
It was fun, zippy, zany. Could have been a lot better. And frankly, I'm surprised that the sheer amount of reshoots they had to do, because other than the part where the Atlanteans, reveal themselves to the world, the rest of it didn't feel like. And maybe the part where they end Manta's story definitively by having him commit suicide, it didn't feel like they really had to change much of the ending of what this story was to accommodate the fact that it's the last DCEU film. So I'm not sure where the rest of the reshoots were focused on. Because again, on paper, it's a simple premise. It shouldn't be that hard to execute a simple adventure, revenge, type story. And if you think about it, it has a lot of similar plot beats to the first movie. But I doubt that when it comes out that it's going to have any type of extensive making of featurettes, because nowadays studios tend to shy away from telling you Oh, if there's anything remotely hinting of something bad having happened or unnormal, how abnormal, they're not going to tell you about it. So, yeah, it's fun. It's zany. I've got my Regal Unlimited thing, so I might see it again. So yeah, it was fun. It's still enjoyable, but a bit disappointing. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it could have been a much stronger film. There is no doubt about that, but they chose not to do that. This is what they wanted to go with, and I get it. I would have liked to have seen more serious situations, more serious adult situations, and I'm not just talking about sexual situations, just even more serious nature, scenes of a serious nature, if you will, more serious. And I think they could have gone there, but they wanted this to be a light film, so it is what it is. So I do recommend the film. I love the film. Catherine, it's been so great having you here tonight. Catherine, where can people find you?
At Slice Night on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Um, Find me on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel. Currently reviewing the latest season of Fargo with Scotty R37 on Thursday nights at 7 Pacific. And we already reviewed season 1 in the Fargo movie. You could find all sorts of playlists for other things we reviewed: Tarantino, Rodriguez, Batman, Spider-Man movies, James Bond, all the James Bond movies. We have a lot of fun there. So check that out. And then every second and fourth Sunday of the month, streaming at 8 a.m. Pacific, is The Unifying Force, which is a Star Wars talk show on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel. So yeah, it's fun.
Fantastic, Catherine. And guys, you can always find me here on Positive Fandom or on the Burr Network. Please do like and subscribe and check out Catherine on her channels, and also check out my work on my channels as well. Scott, I have no idea, but I know there's a Midnight Metal this weekend. So why don't you please do check out that, Scott. Guys, coming up at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be on here with Julian reviewing For All Mankind, Scott. So please do check in for that. And once again, Catherine, it's always a pleasure to have you here to review practically anything, honestly. I enjoyed doing this immensely. And happy holidays to all of you out there. If I don't see you before the Christmas holiday, Merry Christmas to you all. Catherine, it's been such a pleasure reviewing this film. And of course, Catherine and I will be back reviewing many more films throughout the new year, honestly. So I am excited for that, guys. I want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Yes, I am also a Regal Unlimited member, and so is my mom.
Yep,
So
I am too.
yeah, it's great. I love it. And as I said, the Regal near me, they have a bar, and that's all I'm going to say. And also, Tom Jr. Jackson's birthday is coming up in a few days. Tom, if you are out there, I wasn't quite sure if he was home today, but Tom, happy birthday to you coming up, guys. So everybody out there, I just want to thank you all for the support on the channels and for everything. Honestly, you guys are the best. Please do enjoy the rest of your holiday season if I don't see you. And remember, guys, no matter where you are in the galaxy, always remember to please be kind. Take care, everybody.